Let's start with a familiar Friday afternoon scenario. A teacher sits down to draft a rubric for next week's assignment. 45 minutes later, they've built a single, technically sound grading grid. It perfectly measures academic mechanics like grammar and factual recall, but it entirely misses the spiritual formation the school claims to prioritize. Look at this conceptual model. We often draw a hard boundary line between the measurable academic side of a student, these structural shapes, and the invisible, formless space of their internal faith. When schools try to grade that formless space directly, they end up with criteria that are unmeasurable, legally fraught, or biased against non-believing students. But if Christian schools stop trying to grade a student's heart, they can shift to assessing observable, formation-aligned behaviors instead. A weak internal criterion asks if a student demonstrates love. An observable criterion asks a student to identify one specific, realistic action that applies the lesson to a current relationship. Moving the focus strictly to what a student does or produces allows educators to rigorously assess spiritual formation, completely avoiding the impossible task of judging a student's soul. This brings us to a specific technological execution. What you're looking at is a Claude Project, a clean, persistent digital workspace with a dedicated instructions panel on the left and a chat area on the right. Unlike standard one-off AI chats that start with a blank slate every time, a project remembers its context. It never forgets its specific purpose. You do the setup exactly once. In early September, a teacher pastes standing instructions defining Claude's role as a rubric assistant, requesting a standard 4-level rubric format, and setting a strict rule to only generate behavioral formation criteria. Once those instructions are saved, the ongoing weekly workflow is reduced to a simple 2-part input. You simply type in a specific academic learning objective and one observable formation goal. Getting the structural setup out of the way up front takes the deeply frustrating weekly chore of rubric design and turns it into a frictionless data entry task. And this workflow isn't limited to Bible classes. It is built to integrate faith into every academic discipline. In this flowchart, we see the 2-part input mapped out. A history objective and citizenship formation goal feed into the central hub, outputting a finished grading grid. The same happens in science. Cellular biology and creation stewardship inputs generate a distinct rubric. Even math works. Connecting algebraic precision to integrity instantly generates a third tailored grid. This speed is driven by Claude Artifacts, a feature that instantly renders the AI's response into a clean, interactive table completely separated from the chat window. You get a robust, fully structured 4-level rubric in about 45 seconds, instead of 45 minutes. When you let the technology handle the structural heavy lifting, you liberate your mental energy to focus entirely on the lesson's actual formational impact. But there is a firm limitation to this technology. Claude cannot grade student work, and it cannot guarantee theological accuracy for your specific school. This is the human gate. Before reaching students, teachers must manually filter the raw output, passing solid criteria and rejecting vague scoring or language bias. Crucially, verify the formational criterion remains strictly behavioral, deflecting any AI drift that assumes internal religious conviction. The tool accelerates the formatting. But educational judgment and the safeguarding of your students are exclusively human responsibilities. Once you approve the criteria, the export process is entirely frictionless. You can click to copy the table directly into Google Docs or your learning management platform. Looking at this growth network, you can see the compounding time savings over a semester. One 10-minute setup in September branches out to yield dozens of rigorous rubrics by November, without ever rebuilding the tool. Because the friction is gone, including a rich, observable formation criterion becomes the default path of least resistance, rather than an exhausting afterthought. By automating the formatting mechanics, educators finally reclaim the time they need to consistently deliver on their core promise, forming the whole student.